The power of suggestion. So everything is intricately connected. There's no separation between me and all the human beings. There's no separation between me and the air I'm breathing. There's no separation between you and life itself and the birds and the trees and the plants and the universe, and everything is intricately connected. And this is why suggestion has so much power to us as human beings. We're so stuck in believing that we're individuals that usually when we think of the power of suggestion, it's kind of like something out there can give a suggestion to me. But that's not really the way it works. The way it works more is like, there's like this field of consciousness that we're all in, and entities that are outside of me can intersect with me in all sorts of different ways. Well, it's easy enough to understand if you've ever been criticized, particularly if you were criticized when you were young, right? That you're bad, then we hold that forever. My teacher, Osho, once said, he said, I can tell you over and over and over again how beautiful you are, and you will never believe me. But if I tell you you're bad once, you'll hold on to that forever. That's the way we are, right? Power of suggestion. We have a lot of control over what we take in and the way that we take things in. But so much of it just comes from outside of ourselves. And this is so important to understand as we're studying spirituality, because this is what all native spirituality is based on. That if a human being is raised in an awake society, awake tribe is probably a better way to describe it. If a human being is raised in this awake tribe, this awake group of people, they will naturally awaken themselves, because all the suggestions that they're given their whole life will be suggestions about, look at the trees and how we are related to the trees. Ask permission before you gather food and eat it. Listen to the rivers when you're sitting next to the rivers. And native societies will also always ask, who are you? Who are you? So that all of our ancestors from way, way back 60,000 years ago lived ripe spiritual lives where they were spiritually alive, and they knew who they were, and they knew what their purpose was. We don't live in that society. We live in a society that has told us that we're bad, that we're wrong, that, you're going to go to heaven, you're going to go to hell. I mean, just so many conflicting, confusing messages come to us all the time. And I got to go into this marketing, right? We are constantly marketed to with suggestions. Marketing executives know this, know that there are ways that they can just take masses of human beings and make us desire a particular thing and go buy it. So the power of suggestion. I have a little story about how you can open yourself to helpful suggestion. And this is about, so I was diagnosed with cancer. It was a bad kind of cancer. The hope of recovery from it was very small, but I just relaxed into the necessity of each step that needed to happen. And there were two moments where power of suggestion was very powerful. One was my wicked stepmother. I do have a wicked stepmother. It's important to know. She's a fabulous gal, a good sense of humor. She was talking to me on the phone before I went down to the doctor, and she said, "Now, Connie," she's got this very strong New York accent. She's like, "Connie, be nice to the nurses. You'll have a much better outcome." So what's funny is that I was gonna be nice to the nurses anyway. I mean, there's really no reason to not be nice to a nurse, right? I mean, I hope. So I was gonna do it anyway. But having her tell me that in that particular way was very powerful, particularly because I was in a state of openness and receptivity. And I know that she loves me, and she's older than me, and she's wise. She's been through things. She's lived her life very awake. So, Connie, be nice to the nurses. You'll have a much better outcome. So, what this did was, first of all, it was the very first thing that implanted in my mind since I had the diagnosis that a better outcome was possible. So, this was the first little crack in the statistically horrible nature of the particular cancer that I had. And so the power of suggestion, I mean, it was so powerful that this one little statement just stayed through me through the whole thing. And then every time a nurse did this or a nurse did that or whatever, it was easier for me to be consciously nice to them on purpose because my stepmother had told me to do it. So it enhanced my ability to surrender, because not only was I surrendered to the process of what was going on, but I was surrendered to what I had been told by my ancestor, right? Who told me this out of great care. So powerful, powerful statement of a very, very simple thing became a thread of both groundedness and action on my part. See, the whole thing was kind of like the fasting that I was talking about in the last video. We have control over so very few things, but we do have control over whether or not we're nice to nurses. And we have control over how conscious we are about doing that, right? So one very small statement became this powerful healing agent. And the other thing about it was that it didn't come from me. It wasn't me. I didn't read a book. Okay, so, you got to do this. You got to think this. You got to put a sticky note up on your mirror that says, "Be nice to nurses." It came from outside of me, and it came from someone who loved me. So we're so interconnected, and we're not individual, we're not separate. The more I try to have my will be the thing that's driving reality, the more out of step of reality I am, the more in illness I am. So for you and for me and for everyone, every time something happens that can open us up to our connectedness with everything, we need to take it with the utmost gratitude. I'm sure this is one of the reasons why in Native societies They would spend a lot of time just simply listening to the leaves, listen to the water. Having a spirit animal, what is this animal actually telling us? So listening, listening, listening. And if you listen, things will come to you. Little things. It doesn't have to be huge. It's the little things. Like I said before, I never need to put this little statement up on my mirror with a sticky note because it was just given to me in this way. Be nice to nurses. You'll have a better outcome. The other thing that happened was really funny. So they're sending me off for this. I mean, the chemo that they gave me was like the worst chemo possible. I had this one oncologist who didn't want to give it to me because he says, this could destroy your heart. This is really, really a bad chemo. But I had a really, really bad cancer. I needed to have this like horrific, horrible red chemo of death. It was like actually red. So anyway, I go in to see the surgeon for my first time. And this is the person who's going to give me the mastectomy. But after the chemo's done. So he kind of talks to me and he's nice, he's trying to give me a little hope. And then when I'm leaving, he just looks at me and says something like, okay, your job, you go home and you take all this chemo that we're giving so that when you come back, the cancer is 100% gone and I can give you this surgery. So again, inflammatory breast cancer is not a lump. So it's not like just a lump they can take out. It's more like a cancerous virus. And so it doesn't really have edges, to take out. And particularly because by the time I got in there, I was at a fairly advanced state. And so really the only thing that could have worked was this strong, strong chemo of death. And so he just looked at me and said, you go home, do this chemo, and come back with the cancer completely gone. And I said, okay. And so I just completely relaxed into like a 3 months. It was a long, long time of a schedule of chemo. What they're trying to do is just get you the closest to death that they can possibly do without killing you. So they give it to you just as much as you can possibly stand, and then you recover a little bit, and then they give you some more, and then you recover a little bit. And so I just relaxed into this process just as much as I could. And when I came back, they started doing little biopsies around, and they couldn't find any cancer. And then they gave me the surgery, and they biopsied every cell of everything that they took off of me and couldn't find any cancer left. And the doctor comes back in and he's like, wow, it's all gone. And I said, well, you told me to do that. He really laughed. He was like, I cured you. And I'm like, yes, you did. Oh, one more story, just because if we're telling stupid stories, right? Okay, so as I went through this whole process, we decided that there's this really, really lame joke where the person goes into the doctor and the doctor's going to do whatever. And the person says, but doc, am I going to be able to play the violin? And the doctor says, well, yes, you will. And the patient goes, good, because I couldn't before. So our goal was to lay this joke on as many people as we possibly could. So everywhere I went, I'm kind of like looking for, the foot in the door where I could lay down my joke. And so That's part of being nice to nurses, right? Giving them a good laugh. Anyway, I still cannot play the violin. But power of suggestion. I hope that kind of gives you an idea of just really how it's because we are so intricately connected. It doesn't have to do with belief, it has more to do with surrender, surrender to life. And actually, that's what die before you die means anyway.